"We have to paint over this awful, dated wood paneling," Brenda announced, not even looking at me. She was directing two workmen who looked at me with pity. "It's just depressing." I ran my hand over the teak. "I won the Parker Institute Award for this paneling, Brenda. My late husband David and I milled this wood ourselves." She just patted my arm, that same condescending pat she'd perfected. I know. You're sentimental." She smiled, a tight, bright smile for the workmen. "But sentiment doesn't build a brand. My home, the one I designed and built, was about to be spray-painted beige to match her Instagram feed. She was erasing me from my own life, one improvement at a time. But that explosion, that moment of painted-over disrespect, was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. To understand how we got there, you need to see how the taking began. The taking didn't start with a bang. It started with a word. Family. That was the word. Family was the velvet glove they used to cover the fist of their demands. It began as a whisper, a small favor, a little loan. It always started right here, at this very desk. This desk, it's not some delicate antique. It's a partner, a massive 7-foot slab of solid oak that my late husband David and I bought at a university surplus sale. It's scarred with X-Acto knife cuts and old ink stains from blueprints that became buildings. Our life's work is mapped on its surface. And now, it's where I perform the monthly ritual of my surrender. I was sitting there, the morning sun hitting the ledger for the Vance Family Trust. The ledger itself was a lie. There was no family in this trust. There was just me, the sole signatory, and them, the sole beneficiaries. My pen hovered over the checkbook. The ink was a deep, almost black blue, the color of a bruise. The door to the study creaked. Arthur, my son, drifted in. He never walks anymore. He drifts, propelled by the whims of his wife. "There she is," he said, his voice bright and hollow, the voice of a man selling something he doesn't believe in. Brenda was right behind him, a living, breathing Instagram filter. She was already dressed in her athleisure, which, for her, was just leisure, and held a green smoothie the color of envy. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. She looked at the checkbook. "Brenda and I were just finalizing the projections for the spring relaunch," Arthur began. Projections. Relaunch. These were Brenda's words, not his. My son, the consultant, a man who consults on nothing and produces even less, was now the head of PR for his wife's vanity project. Brenda's brand was called Aura, just Aura. It consisted of $80 a bottle Himalayan balancing mist, which I was pretty sure was just tap water and lavender oil, and a series of wellness retreats for which she had not sold a single ticket. The spring relaunch was to fund a new line of, I kid you not, chakra-aligned yoga mats. This house, my house, was her unpaid-for backdrop. She'd film herself doing yoga on the cantilever deck I designed, claiming the energy of the space was curated. I wanted to tell her, "That's not energy, Brenda. That's structural engineering. I curated that with steel rebar." "This isn't just a brand, Mom," Brenda chimed in, finally addressing me, her voice smooth and practiced. "It's a movement. We're curating authentic wellness for a new generation." I looked at the smoothie. Authentic wellness apparently cost $20,000 this month. I wanted to ask, "A movement of what, Brenda?" From my bank account to yours. But I didn't. That was the unspoken contract. I was the creator, the builder. They were the family. And in their new definition, family meant I paid for their dreams, no questions asked. Arthur, seeing my silence, moved in. He put his hand on my shoulder. It felt light, insubstantial. "Mom, this $20,000, it's a lifesaver. You're the angel investor of this family." Angel investor. I felt more like the fatted calf. An angel has wings. They can fly away. I was just here, grounded, tethered to this desk by a checkbook. I didn't look at them. I just looked at the ledger. I ripped the check from the book. The sound was a sharp, satisfying thwip. A tiny, necessary amputation. I slid it across the oak. My hand was steady. It always was. You don't build a house like this, a life like this, with shaky hands. But inside, I felt that familiar, cold hollowing, the feeling of being a resource, not a person. Arthur took the check, relief washing over his face so completely it looked like weakness. "Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this." A phrase so often repeated, it had lost all meaning. Brenda, however, was already in motion. She didn't say thank you. She just gave me her business smile. "This is so vital, Eleanor. The momentum is everything." She pulled out her phone, already tapping. "I'll be in the East Wing filming a testimonial. The light there is perfect." And just like that, they were gone. The check and the conversation was over. They drifted out, leaving only the scent of her expensive perfume and that green, grassy smoothie. I sat alone in the silence. The ledger was still open. I looked at the line item, March B. Vance, LLC, investment. I should have written tithe or toll. This house, David and I built it to be a fortress of clarity, of light, of honest materials, and it had become a stage for their hollow performance. I looked at the wall, the real, solid teak. The wood David and I had sanded, stained, and sealed with our own hands. I remembered the sawdust in his hair, the smell of tung oil, the shared look of exhaustion and triumph when we finally hung the last panel. We were builders. It's what we did. It's who we were. We believed in work, in sweat, in blueprints. We believed you earned your space in the world. But I had raised a son who didn't know how to build anything. He only knew how to take. He was a consultant, and she was a curator. They didn't make things. They repackaged things. They monetized things. And right now, I was the thing being monetized. I closed the ledger. The thud of the heavy leather book was a final, quiet punctuation. My passivity, my silence, it was my own fault. I had let family become a one-way street. I was the angel investor in a company designed to bankrupt me, one $20,000 relaunch at a time. I was so busy being their angel, I'd forgotten to be my own architect. That thought stayed with me long after they left. It followed me through the empty rooms, a silent echo in a house that had become too large for just one person, yet too small to contain the egos of three. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the sound of a place holding its breath. I went back to my study, back to the oak desk, but this time I didn't reach for the ledger. In the corner, tucked behind a filing cabinet, was a long, dusty cardboard tube. The plastic cap resisted at first, stuck with time, but then it came loose with a faint, sighing hiss. I pulled out the roll. The paper was heavy, heavier than paper has any right to be. It was thick, crisp, and smelled of graphite, old ink, and a faint, dry sweetness. It smelled like work. I cleared a space on the desk, pushing aside the single, neatly stacked bill for the house's utilities, the bill I paid. I unrolled the blueprints. The sound was like a sharp intake of breath, a shush that cut the silence. There, under the dim desk lamp, was the soul of my home, my life. This wasn't some sterile, computer-generated printout. This was art. Hand-drawn, every line laid down with a T-square and a steady hand. My hand, the lettering, precise, all caps, blocky architect script, was mine. E. Vance, lead architect. D. Vance, structural. My finger, now wrinkled with age, traced the load-bearing wall of the great room. I could still feel the phantom ache in my shoulder from drafting it. I saw the call out for the floating staircase, the one David said was impossible, right before he figured out how to weld the steel supports himself. My eye drifted to the East Wing, the place where Brenda was filming her testimonial in the perfect light. I saw my original note, maximize morning light, 30-degree exposure. She wasn't wrong, the light was perfect. I had designed it to be. I closed my eyes, and for a second, I wasn't alone. The scent of ink and paper was replaced by the sharp, clean smell of fresh-cut teak and sawdust. David was there. He wasn't the sick, frail man he became at the end. He was David. Strong, loud, and covered in a fine layer of dust, his safety glasses pushed up into his graying hair. He was holding up a plank of the very wood Brenda now called dated and depressing. He grinned, his teeth white against his dusty face. "You were right, Elle. The vertical grain is the only way to go. Anything else would have been a compromise." I remembered the fight. It wasn't a compromise, David. It was wrong. The horizontal lines would have fought the ceiling height. And God forbid we fight the ceiling height. He'd laughed. He ran his hand over the plank, his touch a caress. It's perfect. It's warm. A house that breathes, Elle. That's what you've designed. I opened my eyes. The memory faded, leaving a cold ache in my chest. A house that breathes. Now, it felt like it was suffocating. I looked at the blueprints again. This document. This was a marriage certificate. It was a record of shared dreams, of arguments and compromises, of two people pouring the absolute best of themselves into something solid, something real. We hadn't just built a house. We had built a testament. We had built it for our family. I stared at the name on the ledger. B. Vance, LLC. They saw this house, our testament, and just saw a brand, a backdrop, a set. An asset to be leveraged, a shell to be gutted and painted beige. They were termites, eating the foundation of my life, all while telling me what a beautiful house it was. Brenda's words from that afternoon came back, sharp and clear. Sentiment doesn't build a brand. I rolled the blueprint back up. My hands were slow, deliberate. She was wrong. Sentiment was exactly what built this. Sentiment and love and calloused hands and a shared vision. I slid the roll back into its tube. The thud as it hit the bottom was hollow, final. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking my past. They were taking David's memory and painting over it, one improvement at a time. I was the architect, living in a house I designed, being treated like an unwanted tenant on the verge of eviction. It didn't stay a metaphor for long. It became their next brilliant idea. They found me in the atrium a week later. The atrium was my sanctuary. It was a 2-story, glass and steel heart I had designed for the center of the house, a place where the outside was invited in. It was filled with my orchids, plants I had nurtured for decades, their roots clinging to pieces of bark. I was misting a new bloom when they walked in. Brenda, as always, was leading. She was practically vibrating with a new, manic energy. Arthur, as always, was trailing a step behind, his expression a practiced, nervous echo of her enthusiasm. "Eleanor, you're not going to believe the breakthrough we've had," Brenda announced. She never called me Mom. That privilege, it seemed, was only for when Arthur was asking for money. "It's huge, Mom," Arthur echoed, right on cue. "A total game changer." I set the mister down, my hand steady. "Oh." Brenda stepped closer, her eyes scanning the atrium not as a garden, but as a potential. Something else. The Aura brand. It's not just products, Eleanor. It's an experience. We've been thinking too small. We need a destination. I blinked. "A destination? You mean like a retail store? A spa?" She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. No. This house." She spread her arms wide, a gesture that was meant to be inclusive but felt proprietary. "We're officially rebranding the house as the Vance Wellness Retreat." I felt the blood drain from my face. The Vance Wellness Retreat. My name, my husband's name. The name we'd built, the name that was on the spine of textbooks, on the corner of blueprints for city halls and libraries. And now, it was going to be on a wellness retreat for her water-misting brand. "Brenda," I said, and my voice was colder than I intended. "This is a home. It's not a set. It's not a hotel." "That's the synergy, darling," she shot back, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's both. We're not changing a thing. We're elevating it." "Yeah, Mom," Arthur chimed in. "Think of the exposure. People will see how amazing this place is, the place you built." He said it with such earnestness, as if he were handing me a gift. He was using my own life's work as a bargaining chip, and didn't even realize it. Exposure. I wanted to tell him I didn't need exposure. I had a reputation. He was the one who was exposed, vulnerable, with no foundation of his own. But Brenda, she was already moving on. She was in business mode. "Now," she said, clasping her hands, "for the retreat aspect to work, we need to create a truly authentic, immersive experience for our clients. We're talking 4-day, 3-night packages. And the only room that has the square footage for the group meditation circles and the hot stone therapy is, well, it's the master suite." Silence. The atrium was suddenly, profoundly silent. The only sound was the drip, drip drip, from the mister I'd set on the slate floor. The master suite. My room. The room I had shared with David for 45 years. The room where I still kept his reading glasses on the nightstand, right where he'd left them. The room with the floor-to-ceiling windows I'd designed to catch the very first light of the morning. Our room. My room, I whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of horrified fact. Arthur, to his credit, finally had the grace to look ashamed. He winced, running a hand through his hair. Mom, it's just for a little while. Just for the filming. Just for the first few retreats. We have to, look successful. To be successful. And we'd never just kick you out, Eleanor, Brenda added, her voice dropping into that syrupy, condescending tone. That's the best part. We've already planned it. We're going to move your things to the pool house. She beamed, as if she had just solved world hunger. The pool house, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, it's so much better for you, really. No stairs, it's all one level, and it's… She paused, searching for the perfect, dismissive word. It's cozy. Cozy. There it was. The word. The great American euphemism for small, cramped, and unimportant. The word you use for a college dorm room, for a broom closet you've thrown a mattress into. The pool house. It wasn't a guest house. It was a glorified shed. It was a concrete block structure that held the pool filter, a half bathroom for swimmers, and a collection of David's old, rusty gardening tools. She was evicting me to a shed, and she was calling it an upgrade. My hand was still resting on the orchid stem. I could feel the fragile, living pulp under my fingertips. I didn't look at them. I just stared at the flower. So, you would be in my room, and I would be in the pool house, I stated, forcing my voice to remain perfectly even. Exactly. Brenda clapped her hands. It's perfect. You're still on the property, but the clients get the full aura experience. It's a win-win. Arthur, seeing my lack of protest, mistook my shock for acceptance. The relief on his face was immediate. See, I told you she'd understand. You're a lifesaver, Mom. There was that word again. Lifesaver. I was a lifesaver. An angel investor. It seemed I was everything to them, except a person. Wonderful, Brenda said, already pulling out her phone and tapping on the screen. I'm so glad you're on board and really part of the Aura family, Eleanor. This is so exciting. She looked up, her smile all business. The movers will be here on Friday to handle the heavy furniture. You'll just need to pack your personal things. And with that, they turned and walked out of the atrium. The breakthrough meeting was over. They hadn't come for a discussion. They had come to deliver a notification. Friday. It was Tuesday. They had given me 3 days to pack up 45 years of my life and move into a shed. I stood there for a long time. I looked down at the orchid I'd been tending. My knuckles were white. I had been gripping the stem so tightly, I'd crushed it. The delicate, beautiful flower was broken, hanging by a thread, its head bowed in defeat. I was no longer the architect. I wasn't even the angel investor. I was dated paneling. I was sentiment. I was an obstacle, a piece of old furniture to be moved into the cozy shed to make room for the new brand. It's one thing to be told you're just a piece of old furniture. It's another to be physically moved by men in matching polo shirts. The movers were polite, efficient. They handled the walnut nightstand, the one David and I bought at a flea market on our honeymoon, and refinished ourselves with the same impersonal care they gave the boxes of old towels. I was moved on Friday, just as she'd said. My new, cozy home. The word cozy was a masterpiece of marketing, a true Aura brand spin. The pool house wasn't a guest house. It was a concrete block utility room with a half bath. The main room smelled faintly of chlorine from the filter system next door, with a sharp, metallic undertone of rust from David's old gardening tools, which I didn't have the heart to move. The single slider window looked out at the back of the main house. My house. I could see the master suite, my suite, where the lights were on at all hours. I was an exile, an architect living in a shed in my own backyard, reduced to watching my legacy be rebranded. And so, from my shed, I became a spectator. The rebrand began. White vans arrived, not with clients but with more things. Boxes of yoga mats, crates of bottled Aura water, new, sterile-looking furniture, all white and chrome, like a high-end dentist's office. Then, the sound started. At first, It was just Brenda's voice, high and sharp, echoing across the pool patio as she directed a photo shoot, which, as far as I could tell, consisted of her wearing different outfits while looking serene on my cantilevered deck. But the tone changed. The $20,000 I'd given them, it was vapor. It didn't become anything. It was just a down payment on their delusion. The real sounds began about 2 weeks in. The arguments. I'd sit on the one folding chair David kept for his gardening boots, drinking instant coffee. My proper coffee maker was in a storage unit, and I'd listen. The concrete walls of the pool house didn't block the sound of their panic. "What do you mean the Amex is maxed?" That was Brenda. Her voice, no longer curating, was just shouting. "Brenda, the corporate card is declined. I don't know what to tell you." That was Arthur. "Where are the RSVPs? Did you boost the post?" "You have to boost the post." "I did. It's not working. No one is signing up." The Vance Wellness Retreat had no clients. The white vans stopped coming. The influencers she'd boasted about inviting, and I suspect offered to pay, never materialized. The house grew quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It was the loud, ringing, oppressive silence of catastrophic failure. An empty wellness retreat. All the aura in the world couldn't hide the stench of desperation. It happened on a rainy Thursday. About a month after my eviction, I was sketching on a pad a new idea for a public park bench, just a doodle, to keep my hands busy. Then, a frantic knock. Not on the main house's grand double-door entrance, on my door, the shed. I opened it. There they were. They looked awful. Brenda's eyes were red and puffy. The mascara she was probably testing for her brand was smudged under her eyes. Her expensive, cream-colored yoga pants were stained with what looked unmistakably like chocolate ice cream. Arthur's face was a pale, pasty gray. His hair, usually so perfectly consultant coiffed, was sticking up in anxious, sweaty clumps. They weren't curators or angel investors or visionaries. They were just two terrified, over-leveraged 40-somethings who had finally reached the end of their credit line. "Mom," Arthur started, his voice cracking. He had to look down at me. I was standing on the concrete floor of the shed. They were on the pool deck. The symbolism was not lost on me. We have a situation." Brenda, incapable of waiting, pushed past him. She wasn't asking for entry. She was storming the last castle. "Eleanor, your bank, they're not cooperative." I took a sip of my instant coffee. It was cold. My bank is very cooperative. My pension check deposited right on the first." "No," she snapped. "The business bank, the bank for the Aura LLC. They won't extend our credit line, not after." She gestured wildly. "At the empty house, the empty pool. The launch costs." "She means the cards are maxed, Mom," Arthur whispered, collapsing onto the folding chair. He put his head in his hands. Brenda shot him a look of pure venom. "It is a temporary cash flow problem, Arthur. We are on the verge of a breakthrough. But the bank, they said we're undercapitalized. They said we need a co-signer. Someone with significant assets." Ah, there it was. I looked around my cozy shed, at the rust on the garden shears, at the concrete floor. Significant assets. They won't give us the loan. Arthur mumbled into his hands. "Brenda, we're ruined." Brenda wasn't ruined. She was furious. She spun on me, and the last shred of her wellness mask evaporated. This wasn't a curator. This was a cornered animal. "This is your fault," she shrieked. "That $20,000 wasn't enough. It was an insult. You set us up to fail. You've been sitting out here in your shed, just waiting for this." "Brenda, stop," Arthur yelled, his voice muffled. "No, I'm tired of managing her. Eleanor, listen to me." She stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "We need your name. We need you to co-sign on a new business loan. It's just a formality. The bank sees this house." She pointed back at my house. "They see your name, and we get the $250,000 we need. It's simple. $250,000. Tied to my name, my reputation, my credit. They hadn't just come for my money. They had come for the last thing David and I had built together, our good name, our legacy. They wanted to douse it in gasoline and use it as a torch to light their path. This was the overreach." Arthur finally looked up, his eyes pleading. The son I remembered, the little boy who loved building models, was gone. In his place was this weak, terrified man, begging me to set myself on fire to keep his wife warm. "Mom, please, this is it. This is the last push, I swear. We're a family." I looked at the loan documents in Brenda's hand. I looked at the desperation on my son's face, and I looked at the rust on David's garden shears. My hand was shaking, not with fear, with something else, something cold and clear. I put my hand out and they thought I was reaching for a pen. Instead, I took the application from Brenda's hand. I looked at the fine print. I looked at the blank line waiting for my signature. My name, Eleanor Vance. I folded the paper, slowly. I said, and their heads snapped up, hanging on my every word. "I need to think." I said the words, and the sound of my own voice, so calm and measured, surprised even me. Brenda's face tightened. She hates not getting an immediate yes. It's not in her aura brand to be denied. Arthur just looked relieved I hadn't said no. "Of course, Mom," he said, the picture of the dutiful son. "Take your time. Just not too much time. The bank needs an answer by tomorrow." They left. I watched them walk back to the main house, back to my house. They were two predators who, having cornered their prey, were now just waiting for it to bleed out. But I wasn't prey, and I wasn't thinking. I was checking. I didn't go to bed. I didn't even turn on the bare bulb overhead light in the shed. I just sat at the small metal gardening table, the loan application in my hand. $250,000, tied to my name, my reputation. My suspicion wasn't a vague feeling anymore. It was a cold, hard, structural certainty. You don't co-sign on a foundation you're not sure is stable. That's Architecture 101. I looked back at the main house. The lights in the master suite, my suite, were blazing. They were probably celebrating, already spending the money in their heads. I, however, walked out of the shed. The night was cold. The rain had stopped. I walked, not to the grand front entrance, but around to the back, to the glass door of my study, my real office, the one I still paid the bills from. My key slid into the lock without a sound. The room was just as I'd left it, only dustier. They hadn't bothered with it. My old oak desk, my partner, was waiting for me. I didn't turn on the lamp. The blue-white light from my phone was enough. I didn't need the loan application. I needed the charter. From the bottom locked drawer, the one David and I used to call the vault, I pulled the heavy, leather-bound binder, Vance Family Trust. My hands weren't shaking now. They were precise. David and I set this up decades ago with Mr. Harrison, our old corporate lawyer. It wasn't complicated. It was a simple living trust, designed to manage the house and our assets, to provide for me, and then for Arthur, upon my death. I was the sole trustee, the architect of the finances, just as I was the architect of the house. But, wait, 3 years ago, my hip replacement, there was a small complication, a brief scare. Arthur. He had been so worried. I remembered his face, pale and frightened. "Mom," he'd said, "what if we can't make decisions for you? What if we can't even pay your hospital bills?" We'd signed something. The new lawyer, the one Brenda found for us, said it was just in case. A limited power of attorney, for medical decisions, for paying my bills if I was incapacitated. My phone screen was too small. I turned on my old desktop computer. The tower whirred to life with a small, loyal sound. The screen flickered, then lit up the dark room. I logged into the Trust's online bank portal. The password was David Vance, 1,975, something they would never in a million years guess. The main page loaded, the balance. I felt the blood. Just stop. It was wrong. It was devastatingly wrong. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars lower than it should be. I clicked on transaction history. My mind was racing. The ledger I kept in the shed was just for my pension. This was the real account, the one that held our life's work. I saw the $20,000 investment I'd given them, and I saw it was just the last in a long, long, long line of withdrawals. But they weren't labeled B. Vance, LLC. They were different. $15,000, H. Ev, Vance Home Maintenance, Roof Repair. $8,000, HVAC, Vance Home Maintenance, HVAC Servicing. $22,000, FAS, Vance Home Maintenance, Foundation Survey. My blood went cold. Not a little cold. It turned to ice. The roof was new. I had paid for it from my personal account. The HVAC system, I'd just had it serviced. It cost $300, not $8,000. They weren't just asking for money. They had been stealing it. For months, maybe longer. How? How could they? I was the sole trustee. And then I saw it, in the Statements and Documents tab, a scanned file. POA authorization, AMB, Vance, Brenda, not even Arthur. Brenda. That limited. Medical. Power of attorney. I downloaded the file, my hand clicking the mouse. I read the clause. To manage all financial affairs in the event of incapacity. My eviction, my cozy shed, my confusion. They had convinced the bank I was incapacitated. They had manufactured my incapacity by moving me to the pool house. They had faked invoices from a Vance Home Maintenance, a company that I knew, with absolute certainty, did not exist, and used that fraudulent POA to authorize wire transfers from my trust to their LLC. This wasn't just leeching. This wasn't being a bad son. This was wire fraud. This was embezzlement. This was elder abuse. This was a federal crime. And the loan, the $250,000 loan, the final piece of the blueprint fell into place. It wasn't to save the business. It was to run. They were already stealing, but it wasn't fast enough. They needed one last massive score, co-signed by me, the sane, competent, asset-holding Eleanor Vance, to drain the last of the equity from the house, and then they'd be gone. They would leave me in the cozy shed, not just broke, but on the hook for their new debt. The click in my chest was so loud, I thought the computer tower had made the sound. It was the sound of my heart. That mother's heart. The one that beat for Arthur. The one that had been so full of unconditional, stupid, blind love. It didn't just fade. It died. It was murdered. It was on the floor of my study, dead, and my son and his wife were the ones holding the knife. I wasn't an angel investor. I wasn't Mom. I was the victim. And I was the evidence. I sat there, in the dark, in the house I built, and for the first time in years, I saw everything. The blueprint of their crime was laid out right in front of me, clearer than any floor plan. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I opened a new browser tab. I looked up a name from a business card I'd saved for 20 years. Mr. Harrison, our old corporate lawyer, the shark. I picked up my phone. My hand was perfectly, absolutely steady. The phone rang twice. Harrison. His voice was gravelly, awake at 3 a.m. Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice as calm and cold as the room. It's Eleanor Vance. A pause. Eleanor, it's been a long time. Is everything all right? No, I said, looking at the fraudulent bank statement on the screen. Everything is finally perfectly clear. What do you need? He asked. I need you to be my lawyer again, I said. I'm ready to dissolve the Vance family trust. And yes, before you ask, I will need you to recommend a forensic accountant, the best one you have. I hung up. It was 3:15 a.m. I didn't sleep. You don't sleep when you're dismantling a bomb, or, in my case, when you've just realized you're the one building it. Sleep. That was for later. For my new life. What I did for the next 3 hours was recalibrate. The woman who spoke to Mr. Harrison was the architect, cold, precise, and seeing the entire blueprint of the crime. But the woman they would see in the morning? She had to be the cozy shed grandma. She had to be the angel. She had to be just a little confused. I sat on the folding chair, in the dark, and I practiced. I practiced the sigh. I practiced the look of befuddled, sentimental weakness. I practiced being the woman they thought I was. At 7:04 a.m., I heard the sound of their footsteps on the pool deck, punctual, anxious. A knock. Not Brenda's sharp, impatient rap. Arthur's, the soft approach. Mom, are you awake? His voice was thin. I waited a full 10 seconds. Then I opened the door, squinting into the morning sun I had been watching rise for hours. I clutched my thin robe. Oh, Arthur. Goodness, you startled me. What What time is it? His eyes in that split second weren't on my face. They were on my hand, the one holding the loan application. Mom, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Have you had a chance to think? I looked down at the paper as if I'd forgotten I was holding it. Oh, this. I let out the sigh I'd practiced. It was a masterpiece of maternal exhaustion and reluctant surrender. Yes, I've been up all night, Arthur. I looked at the concrete floor. It's just so much money. $250,000. Your father, David. He always said you should never co-sign on something you don't. Brenda's door on the main house slid open. She couldn't wait. She'd been listening. Eleanor, we don't have time for what David said, she said, walking quickly across the deck, her bare feet slapping the stone. It's yes or no. The bank is waiting. She was impatient. Good. Let them be impatient. Arthur flinched. Brenda, please, give her a second. He turned back to me, his eyes wide with that practiced little boy lost look. Mom, please. We're at the finish line. It's family. I held the silence for 1, 2, 3 beats. I let their desperation hang in the air, thick and sweet as poison. Then, I gave them the performance of a lifetime. I looked up at Arthur. I let my eyes soften. I manufactured the look of the doting, defeated, loving mother. You're right, Arthur, I whispered. You're right. Family is everything. The whoosh of air was audible. It was the sound of my son and his wife exhaling all their panic. Arthur's shoulders, which had been up by his ears, slumped in relief. Brenda's eyes, they didn't light up with gratitude. They lit up with triumph, that cold, hard flash of a predator that has just successfully cornered its meal. She had won. I added, my voice small, a final brilliant touch of confused old lady. I'm a little muddled by all this paperwork, the fine print. I'll need you two to come with me. To the bank. To, help me. Explain it to me. Make sure I'm signing in the right places. Brenda's condescension, which had been held in check by her panic, returned like a tidal wave. Oh, Eleanor, she said, patting my arm. That pat. Of course. Of course we'll help you. We know it's all so confusing for you. We'll handle everything. Thank you, Mom, Arthur said, and he hugged me. A quick, sharp hug of possession. His hug felt like a cage closing. I didn't hug him back. I just patted his back, my hand light, my mind like a steel trap. The doting mother. We'll go this afternoon, Brenda said. All business, already turning back to the house. But first, I held my breath. First, what? Her smile was blindingly white. It was her aura smile. It's Saturday. It's Chloe's PTA fundraiser. You promised you'd come. We need to show up. As a family, it'll be a celebration for our new start. My granddaughter, the bake sale. I had forgotten. But this was perfect. Mr. Harrison's voice from 3 a.m. echoed in my ear. Let them get comfortable, Eleanor. Let them get arrogant. An ambush only works if the target feels completely, perfectly safe. What was safer than a high school gymnasium smelling of popcorn and cheap pizza? Oh, I said, my voice light. The bake sale. Of course. How wonderful. Let me just get my purse. The gymnasium was a cacophony of squeaking sneakers and shouting kids. It was the absolute bedrock of American suburban life. And I was their newest, greatest prop. Brenda was in her element. She wasn't a fraud. She was Chloe's mom, gliding between tables, laughing too loudly, all while Arthur, the dutiful husband, carried a tray of her Aura-branded, gluten-free, sugar-free, taste-free cupcakes. This is my mother-in-law, Eleanor, Brenda announced to Mrs. Peterson from the school board. She's just the sweetest. She's been our angel, helping us get our new family business off the ground. Mrs. Peterson smiled at me, a warm, genuine smile. Oh, how wonderful. It's so rare to see families so close these days. Oh, we're very close, Brenda said, and she looped her arm through mine. It felt like a handcuff. I just smiled. The doting grandmother. I walked to the bake sale table and bought a Rice Krispie treat for $2. I held it, a small, square, sugary shield. Arthur saw me and came over, his face beaming. He was happy, genuinely, stupidly happy. He thought he'd won. He thought the money was his. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with something. "Thank you. For this. For everything. I told Brenda you'd come through. I knew you wouldn't let us down." He was using the past tense, as if the deal was already done. "Of course not, dear," I said, and I patted his arm. My other hand was still holding the Rice Krispie treat. I was playing my part. I was the confused, sweet, senile old woman, a prop at a bake sale, and I was letting them parade me around, letting them hang their entire future on my signature. I was the architect, and I was letting them walk onto the cantilevered deck, not knowing I had already pulled all the structural supports. "All right," Brenda said, clapping her hands, her social duties fulfilled. "That's done. Let's go to the bank." She grinned, a shark's grin. "Let's go. Finalize the family business." I smiled, my gaze as steady as a level. I looked at the bake sale. I looked at my son. And I looked at the door. "Yes," I said. "Let's." And so, the performance continued. We went to the bank. I sat in the cold leather chair in the manager's office, the cheap bank pen feeling heavy in my hand. Brenda's perfume was suffocating, a mix of lavender and entitlement. She pointed to the signature line on the loan application, her fingernail tapping the paper. "Right here, Eleanor. Just right here." I looked at the bank manager, a man I'd known for 20 years, back when he was a teller and I was signing checks for David's first big project. His eyes were perfectly, professionally blank. He knew his part. I signed my name. Eleanor Vance. The signature of the confused old woman. The signature of the doting grandmother. Arthur exhaled so hard it was a whistle. Brenda's smile could have cut glass. They'd done it. They had their co-signer. They had their $250,000. They had their future. They had no idea that Mr. Harrison had already met with the bank's fraud department. They had no idea the application was flagged, frozen, and already in a file marked evidence. They had no idea my signature wasn't a co-sign. It was a confession. Theirs. And I had just notarized it. With the non-existent loan pending. And the $250,000 wire transfer just days away. Brenda went into overdrive. She spent the last real money in her LLC account to throw the spring relaunch party. 1 week later, my home was a content house. It was packed, not with friends or family, but with axe types, young, beautiful people with aggressively perfect teeth, holding their phones up like they were filtering the air. They were influencers, a word that, to me, just sounded like a synonym for disease. They weren't guests. They were a rented audience. They were curating moments all over my house. I saw a girl with hair the color of a highlighter doing a story in front of my teak paneling. The depressing wood was now, apparently, amazing vintage. I saw another one discovering Brenda's $80 Aura mist, his face a mask of paid-for ecstasy. The air was thick with sandalwood incense, the smell of cheap champagne, and the quiet, desperate hum of networking. And where was I? I was their best prop. They had allowed me to leave the cozy shed for the evening. I was sitting in the great room in my great room on a small, uncomfortable chair they'd rented, right next to the catering table. I was the angel investor, the doting grandmother, a living, breathing testament to their family brand. At 8 p.m., the dreadful, thumping wellness beat softened. Brenda stepped onto a small, temporary white stage set up in front of my fireplace. She was wearing a flowing white dress, the high priestess of her own delusion. She held up a champagne flute. "Welcome, welcome, all you beautiful souls," she cooed. A forest of smartphones rose up, all aimed at her. "Welcome to the Vance Wellness Retreat. Welcome to the future of Aura." She smiled, that blindingly white, empty smile. A brand isn't built alone, it's built on vision, it's built on momentum, it's built on community. She was reading from a script she'd memorized, then her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. Sitting in my corner, she raised her glass, at me. "But most of all," she said, her voice dripping with fake sentiment, "it's built on family, on the partners who believe in you, no matter what." Arthur, standing beside the stage like a proud puppy, clapped louder than anyone. "I want to thank my visionary partner, My angel investor. I felt my stomach clench. My wonderful mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance. A smattering of polite influencer applause. They all looked at me. I smiled my confused little smile. I played my part. "This is just the beginning," Brenda said, her voice swelling with triumph. "This is our new start." And, as if summoned by a cue, the front door opened. The music didn't just fade, it died. The chatter stopped. It wasn't a guest. It was Mr. Harrison. He is an old man, but he takes up all the air in a room. He stood like an oak tree, flanked by two much younger, much harder-looking men in dark, perfectly cut suits. They did not look like influencers. The only sound in the entire house was the click, click, click of Mr. Harrison's hard-soled, expensive shoes on my hardwood floor. He walked right up to the stage. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone but Brenda. Brenda's smile. It didn't just fade. It froze. This was not on her schedule. I'm sorry," she stammered, the microphone catching her sudden lack of aura. Can we help you? This is a private event." Mr. Harrison stopped at the foot of the stage. He looked up at her, his face a mask of polite legal granite. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The silence was so total, you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. "Brenda Vance," he said. His voice cut through the champagne and incense like a razor. Yes. I am Robert Harrison, newly appointed sole trustee for the Vance Family Trust. As of 9 a.m. this morning, the trust, which I represent, is the legal and sole owner of this property." A girl in the front dropped her phone. It clattered loudly on the floor. Brenda's face. Oh, her face. It was a picture. The color drained from it. The high priestess became a ghost. What are you talking about?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Get out of my house! This is my event! This is my home!" Mr. Harrison just looked at her. He didn't even blink. He simply held up a single, folded document. "This," he said, "is a court order." He looked past her, his gaze landing on Arthur, who was frozen, his mouth half open, a gluten-free cupcake in his hand. "This party is over. You," he said, pointing at Arthur. "And you," he pointed at Brenda, "have 30 minutes to vacate the premises." The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. The thumping wellness music was gone. The chatter was gone. The influencers, those beautiful souls with their phones, didn't just leave. They fled. They looked at Mr. Harrison, at the two stone-faced men in suits guarding the door, and they saw something that wasn't content. They saw something real. They grabbed their free Aura Mist swag bags and evaporated into the night, a cloud of sandalwood and panic. In less than 5 minutes, the house was empty. My house. All that was left was the debris, half-empty glasses, plates of untouched gluten-free appetizers, and them. Brenda was still standing on the little white stage, a high priestess in a desecrated temple. Her face was a mask of chalky, confused rage. Arthur was standing beside her, frozen, still holding that single, taste-free cupcake. Mr. Harrison did not wait. He looked at them, his face unreadable. "The kitchen," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a summons. I followed them. I watched as they stumbled off the stage, their new start collapsing around them. I walked from my corner, no longer the prop, no longer the decor. I was the architect. I was the owner. I was the one who had drawn this blueprint. We stood in the kitchen, under the harsh, honest, fluorescent lights. The lights Brenda hated. Brenda found her voice first. It was high, and it cracked. "This is insane! You can't just... Who are you? This is harassment. We have rights. We're calling the police." "I wouldn't recommend that," Mr. Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. He placed his heavy leather briefcase on the granite island, the island Brenda was going to rip out, and clicked it open. The sound, in the dead silence, was as loud as a gunshot. He pulled out a sheaf of papers, fanned them out like a hand of cards. A terrible, winning hand. "You have no rights here," he said, sliding the first paper across the granite. "This is a temporary restraining order, effective immediately. You will not come within 500 yards of Eleanor Vance or this property." Arthur stared at it, his eyes wide. "Restraining order." "Mom? What is this?" "This is your lawyer." He finally looked at me. He wasn't seeing the confused old lady. He was seeing me, for the first time. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze. I let him see the steel. "And this," Mr. Harrison said, sliding the second paper, "is an eviction notice. As I stated, you have 30 minutes to collect your personal effects. Toothbrushes, clothes, medication. That is all." "Leave," Arthur whispered. The cupcake fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Leave. Leave where? This is our home." "No," I said. My voice. It was the first time I had spoken. It cut through the air, cold and clear. "It's my home. And you," I looked directly at Brenda, "were a tenant, a non-paying, destructive tenant, and your lease is terminated." You, witch!" Brenda shrieked, her hand flying to her throat. You set us up. That bank, that loan. You tricked us. You came with us. You signed." "Ah, yes," Mr. Harrison said, a flicker of something almost like a smile in his eyes. "The loan. I'm so glad you brought that up." He pulled out the third file. This one was not a single paper. It was a thick, heavy-bound report. He placed it on the counter with a heavy, final thud. "This," he said, "is a preliminary forensic audit, prepared by the best accountant in the state." He opened it to the first page. It was a bank statement. My bank statement, with lines of fluorescent pink highlighter. "It details," he continued, his voice a calm, factual monotone, "the $360,000 you have, over the last 18 months, embezzled from the Vance Family Trust." Arthur made a sound. A small, choking, dying animal sound. "It details the fraudulent invoices from Vance Home Maintenance and LLC, which we discovered you registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware. It details the wire transfers you authorized," he looked at Brenda, "using a limited medical power of attorney given to you in good faith for Mrs. Vance's hip replacement. You presented her as incapacitated. You, in fact, committed fraud. It details, in short, a clear, multi-year pattern of elder abuse and wire fraud." Brenda wasn't red with rage anymore. She was white, the color of paper, the color of bone. The loan," Arthur stammered, his body shaking. "The $250,000. Mom, you signed. We were approved." "Yes, she did," Mr. Harrison said, not looking up from the file. "She signed it beautifully. And the bank manager, in accordance with our instructions, froze the application 30 seconds after you walked out the door. It was never submitted. It was, however, added to this file as evidence of your intent to commit further, catastrophic fraud." He closed the binder. The click of the 3 rings snapping shut was the sound of a cell door locking. "This isn't a family dispute, Mr. Vance," Harrison said. "This is a criminal case. The IRS and the District Attorney's Office will receive their copies of this audit Monday morning. Checkmate." The room was dead. Arthur was sobbing now, ugly, choked sobs. Brenda was just staring at the binder. She wasn't an influencer. She was a felon. "You can't," Arthur whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, you can't. I'm your son." I looked at him. The boy I'd raised, the man who had let this happen, the man who had helped it happen, the man who had banished me to a shed. "My son," I said, my voice as hard and clean as the granite beneath my hands, "would never have done this. My son would have been a builder." Mr. Harrison looked at his watch. A gold watch. A watch David had given him as a gift 20 years ago. "You have 20 minutes. It wasn't even 20. It was pure, primal chaos. It was Brenda, her face a mask of purple rage, trying to stuff an $80 Aura mist into her purse while also grabbing a handful of my silver spoons. It was Arthur, just weeping, throwing clothes into a black garbage bag. One of Mr. Harrison's men saw the spoons. He simply, silently, took them from her hand. They were escorted out the front door with 2 garbage bags, a box of chakra yoga mats, and the clothes on their backs. And then, silence. The glorious, clean, structural silence of a house that could finally breathe again. 2 months passed. The house was clean. Mr. Harrison's people had debranded it, which meant removing all the white, sterile furniture and uncovering my things from the storage unit. My old oak desk was back in its rightful place. I had, for the first time in years, gone to Costco, just to go. To buy my own paper towels, my own coffee, my own things. There is a profound, simple pleasure in pushing your own cart. It was a gray, drizzling Saturday. The parking lot was a battlefield of oversized shopping carts and families in a hurry. I was pushing my cart toward my car, a modest but paid-for Subaru, when I saw them. I didn't recognize the car. It was an old, dented, beige sedan. One of the taillights was held on with duct tape, but I recognized the performers. They looked damp. Brenda's aura was gone. Her hair was stringy. Her expensive yoga pants now just pants. Arthur looked gray, like he had in the shed, but it seemed permanent now. They were arguing, shouting, actually. Right there in the parking lot for everyone to see. The subject of their rage? A 30-roll bulk package of Kirkland Signature toilet paper. It wouldn't fit in their trunk, which was already full of other bulk, non-glamorous supplies. "Just shove it, Arthur," Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking. "I'm freezing." "I am shoving it," he yelled back, his face crimson. He tried to force it, and the plastic wrap tore. "This was your idea. We'll save money at Costco. You hate Costco." "My idea," she screamed, and it was the same shriek I'd heard in my kitchen. The victim shriek. My idea wasn't to be poor. My idea was not to have my idiot husband get us thrown out of our house. My idea, Arthur snarled, finally turning on her, was not to commit federal fraud, Brenda. So you just shut up. He ripped a roll of toilet paper from the broken pack, threw it into the trunk and slammed it. Then he threw the rest of the giant package, now unraveling, into the back seat, right on top of a giant bag of generic brand potato chips. They weren't curators or visionaries. They weren't family. They were just loud and broke and wet. They were, for the first time, in charge of buying their own toilet paper, and they couldn't even do that right. I put my own, single, sensible 12-roll pack into the back of my Subaru. I got into my car. They never even saw me. I was just another shadow in the rain. I turned the key. The engine started with a quiet, reliable hum, and I drove away. I drove home from Costco. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anything, really. That's the thing about a necessary demolition. You don't celebrate when the rotted-out, termite-infested wall finally comes down. You just feel a quiet, profound relief that it can't hurt you anymore. You're just glad for the clean, empty space and the smell of fresh air. The house was mine again. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. It was the sound of my own thoughts. The sound of my pencil sketching on paper. It was the sound of peace. The criminal charges. Mr. Harrison handled that. In the face of the audit, they had no choice. To avoid a federal trial, Brenda and Arthur signed everything. They signed away any claim to the house. They signed away any claim to the trust. They signed a full legal confession in exchange for probation and community service. They were, in the eyes of the law, ruined. I didn't ask for updates. I was too busy planning. I was an architect again, and I had my biggest project yet, my own life. A few days later, my phone buzzed on the oak desk. It was an unknown number, a local area code, but not one I recognized. I let it ring. In the old days, my heart would have leaped. Is it Arthur? Is something wrong? Now, I just watched it vibrate, a small, angry, buzzing thing. It stopped. A moment later, the little red dot appeared. A voicemail. I put my pencil down. I picked up the phone. I held my breath, just for a second, and I pressed play. The first sound wasn't a voice. It was background noise. A garbled, tinny announcement over a loudspeaker. Cleanup in aisle 7. Then, a man's voice, hesitant, quiet. "Mom." The voice was rough, not smooth, not consultant smooth. It was tired. It's Arthur. I don't know if this is even your number anymore. I got it from, well, it doesn't matter." I could see him, in my mind's eye, as clearly as if I were standing there. He wasn't in a curated space. He was in a break room. I could hear the fluorescent hum. He was sitting on a molded plastic chair, under a Safety First poster. He was wearing an orange apron, a Home Depot apron, stained with something, paint, maybe. He was holding a cheap, pay-as-you-go phone, the kind you buy at a gas station. His hands, the ones that had never held anything heavier than a champagne flute, were probably calloused. I'm at work. My break. I'm a loader. In the lumber department. He laughed, a short, bitter, exhausted sound. Lumber. Kinda funny, right? He took a deep breath. The loudspeaker called for a manager. Look, Mom, I saw you at the Costco the other day. My hand tightened on my phone. You looked good. You looked free. I wanted to say. He stopped. I heard him swallow. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was this raw, exposed nerve. You were right. I get it now. I finally get it. You and Dad. His voice cracked. Just a little. You built things. With your hands. Your brains. You built everything. The house. The business. Us. And I. He sighed. It was the sound of a man seeing himself for the first time and hating what he saw. I just took things. I took. And I let Brenda take. Because it was easier. I wasn't a partner. I was just a leech. I'm sorry, Mom. Not for the money. I mean, yeah, that too. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry I let you down. I'm sorry I wasn't the man Dad raised. He was quiet. I could just hear him breathing. He wasn't crying. He was just done. I gotta go. My break's over. The line clicked. He was gone. I sat there, in the silence of my study. The voicemail icon was still on the screen. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't asked for money. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He had just delivered the lesson. I looked at the message on my screen, and then my thumb moved. I pressed delete. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because it was over. The message was received. The debt, the real one, the moral one, had finally been acknowledged. The last, loose beam of our collapsed foundation had been cleared away. The lesson was learned, and I was finally free to build again. I was free to build again, and I did. I sold the house. It was a beautiful house, a masterpiece of engineering and love, but it had stopped being a home a long time ago. It had become a fortress, then a prison, then a stage for a crime. It was a testament, and its story was over. I sold it to a young family, a tech couple with kids who were excited about the good bones, and yes, the dated teak paneling. I wished them well. I didn't need the space. I didn't need the upkeep. I'm writing this from my new apartment. It's a high-rise downtown with a view that stretches all the way to the mountains. The walls are all glass. There is nowhere for a leech to hide. There are no cozy sheds. It's not a palace. It's just mine. It's a 2-bedroom, and the second bedroom isn't for guests. It's my new studio. My old oak desk, the partner, barely fit through the door, but it's here. It's sitting in a pool of morning light, and it's not covered in ledgers or checkbooks. It's covered in blueprints. I unrolled the new sheet. It's a different kind of paper, printed from a computer, but the smell of graphite and possibility is the same. It's not a house. I'm done building monuments to family. This is the new Vance Community Arts Center. A place for kids in the city who don't have a place to go. A place to build. I'm an architect. It's what I do. I finally cleared out the dated and depressing parts of my life. I finally painted over the rot. It turned out it wasn't the wood paneling that was the problem, it was the people. I proved that it's never too late to start a new design. Sometimes, the most important structure you can ever build is your own exit. So let me ask you, if life handed you a brand new unwritten page, would you have the courage to turn to it? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest of times.